Consciousness is an epistemic axiom, not a metaphysical one. And the reason why this is so important is so we can understand the objective facts of reality as they actually are and classify them appropriately. I've learned a lot from the philosophy of objectivism, but this is a big mistake. Someone who doesn't study philosophy professionally probably can't understand, wait, hold on, what's the big deal about putting consciousness into its correct category of epistemology rather than keeping it in metaphysics. And as I'll go on, the problems that can arise with that will become abundantly clear, because there are huge problems that come with incorrectly classifying consciousness as a metaphysical primary, as an axiom, not a primary before existence. Objectivism doesn't go that far, but unintentionally that is what happens. Metaphysical axioms, what they do, what they are, they describe the totality of existence, not awareness of it or methods of understanding it. It's a crucial error. Metaphysics concerns what is universally. If you don't like that word and you want something bigger, multiversally, omniversally, everything which exists that we know of and that we don't in all dimensions of reality everywhere. Essentially what metaphysics does, it's describing existence exists in the law of identity as an introductory taster to metaphysics and its axioms. It describes the conditions of all existence, not just of some unique specific beings. The first axiom, existence exists. And it sounds so obvious, but there are massive implications behind that. And what I found out in my journey of studying philosophy is that it's not clear enough. Philosophy isn't just for the hyper-intellectual, the professional philosopher. It's for everybody. So this needs to be made more clear, what exactly existence exists and the law of identity really mean. It needs to be made much more explicit and have all the corollaries of that put out. That needs to be formalized better, and that's something that I'm going to do. Even with just existence as the primary axiom of everything, it's the most fundamental axiom ever, and that can be, existence exists. And then you have the law of identity. Everything which exists is a particular thing that has a nature and an identity. Those two axioms already imply consciousness, because if consciousness does exist, well then it exists and it has an identity. So there's no need for an extra axiom of consciousness in metaphysics. Consciousness existing, it's a derivative statement that's under existence exists. It's not a primary statement. It's in the wrong place. Epistemology, what that is, or you can say, when I said it's an epistemic axiom, an epistemological axiom, epistemology itself is the study and theory of knowledge. Very simply, just remember, how do we know? How do you know? How do I know? How do you know anything? That's what epistemology is. It's applicable to everything else, whether it's botany or quantum physics or biology or maths or tying your shoes or anything. You need epistemology. It is anything where you have a conscious being engaging in some kind of activity, doing something that's a derivative of epistemology. How do we know anything? It includes the laws of logic, deduction, induction, reason, perception, conceptualization. That needs to be formalized better as well and put out, like, what is epistemology exactly? You're telling me it's how do you know, but what constitutes that? We'll get around to doing that one day as well. So what Ayn Rand does is that she's confused the levels. She's put a species-specific epistemic condition, consciousness, into a universal metaphysical framework. It's the wrong placement. Because an axiom must be omnipresent according to its domain. That's what an axiom, that's what it means to be an axiom. It means if it's an axiom of existence, it needs to be omnipresent in its domain, needs to be applicable to all things which exist, not just some of them, Consciousness seems to be the rare exception in reality, like just in humans. It's debatable whether you can actually say animals have proper consciousness, and even if you do want to say that, it's not human consciousness. Rocks and plants and wood and tables and TVs and concrete, etc., they don't have consciousness, and there's a lot more concrete or dirt or trees than there are humans and fish. So why would you put consciousness into a metaphysical category? It doesn't belong there. It's the wrong place. It needs to be in epistemology. It's a condition, the state of knowing anything. You must have that there. And apparently ChatGPT told me that my formulation that an axiom must be omnipresent according to its domain was novel, meaning that no one else had ever said that, or that it's aware of, which I find baffling. I mean, it's nice. It's like, oh, I created something all by myself, but I think it's incoherent to think that no one thought of that before. Like, that's the point of an axiom. It needs to be omnipresent in its domain. Like, how can you not think of that? That's the whole point of an axiom. But obviously, some of the greatest minds in history didn't figure that out. It just goes to show that you can't be perfect. You can't get everything right. There's only so much you can do in a lifetime. And what Ayn Rand did was absolutely genius and fantastic and all that stuff. So this is not putting her down whatsoever. It's just pointing out a mistake that needs to be corrected. An axiom implies its domain is impossible without it. And what that means is that for epistemology, consciousness is the primary epistemic axiom. That's where it rightfully and objectively belongs. Meaning you can't know anything. That domain of knowledge is impossible without consciousness. You need to be in that state, that condition of knowingness to be able to know anything. Epistemology is impossible without consciousness. But metaphysics, that's still possible without consciousness. It's just we wouldn't know it. Just because we wouldn't know it doesn't mean that reality would not exist. That's getting into a primacy of consciousness, mystical perspective. No, reality and existence is independent of your consciousness. That's the whole primacy of consciousness. That's what primacy of existence. That's what objectivity is. Objectivity is understanding that reality is independent of your consciousness, and you and your consciousness, it makes it sound like two different things. It's the wrong way to talk about it as well. Because you, if you're listening to this and you understand it, you're conscious. You don't need to say you and your consciousness, or talk about your consciousness understanding this like it's some reified homunculus sitting inside your mind there and it's separate to you. No, you are conscious and you understand. If you didn't exist, the world still exists. The world still goes on. If all the humans died like that, Thanos comes along and says, "See you later, suckers." The world is still here. It still goes on. We just don't know about it. That's all. You need to have a true objectivity in a philosophy, a true primacy of existence model. The axioms need to be grounded in actual reality. And to understand how all this interconnects and interrelates, you need to place the axioms in the correct category. And metaphysical axioms, they're special as they are completely independent. They have no preconditions and are unexplainable beyond it just is. Whereas consciousness, no, it isn't just is. It requires preconditions. It requires existence to exist in some form as the materials that build life, and then you need to have life, and then it needs to be a particular of a particular intelligence to formulate memory, and it needs to feel experience, it needs to have awareness, and it needs to build an ego, and then at some point consciousness arises. There's a whole model, even if that theory isn't perfect, there's a whole host of preconditions which are required for consciousness. I mean, just think of it. When you were born, were you conscious? No. There is just so many elements. It is naive and ignorant to ignore them. You can't. Because that was one of Rand's premises, that consciousness is irreducible. You can't explain it at all. Like there's no ontogeny of it. It just is. I mean, you can say that about reality as a whole. It just is. Because there's no getting behind that. That's what a real metaphysical axiom is about. It just is. You say, well, how did reality get here? No, that's eternal. It just is. Even if you want to add in your explanations of God created it, then you say, where did God come from? How did God get there? Oh, God just is. You know, God just always was. So it doesn't matter what you get to, whether it's some whatever mystical, dare I even say, call them philosophies, religions, or any kind of religion, any kind of philosophy. If you keep pressing them, why is it like this? Or they say, even if they're a skeptic and they say, I don't know, you can't know anything, you can't know anything. Say, why? It's just like that, you just can't know anything. It's just Brahma and Atman, this Yahweh or Muhammad or Allah, whatever, it just is. It is like that. That's the ultimate answer to all of reality. It just is. But that's a metaphysical axiom. You can't say, what's going on with this tree? Oh, it just is. No, but how is the tree? Oh, it grows from a seed, needs water, sunlight. There's a whole big explanation. You can reduce it at least in the form of explanatory power. You can explain it, how that comes to be. You say, well, why are there trees? Maybe there's even an explanation for why there are trees. But why is there something rather than nothing? Oh, there just is. It just is. You can't get any deeper than that. Oh, you say, oh, well, it's because of quantum physics and string theory and there's these little strings. Why are they there? Oh, they just are. Or little metaphysical puffs underneath, or it's all an illusion. Okay, well, why is this illusion existing? Why is there an illusion instead of nothing? Oh, well, there just is an illusion. There is just Maya. You know, I think that's the Buddhist term for illusion. It's just all a simulation. But why does a simulation exist? Oh, it just does. Because the aliens built it. Why did the aliens build it? Oh, they just did. Machines built it. Where'd the machines come from? Oh, they've always just been. Okay, it just is. It's so crucial to hammer that, but you have to understand where the just is answer is applicable. And you cannot then use that for other domains. Like politics, for example, if someone was saying that it just is in politics or in socioeconomic models, oh, you just have to pay your tax. So many people adopt that mindset, and it's infuriating. It's like, why? I remember yelling at my dad when I was young, why do I have to pay tax? Like 12 years old or something, you know, not even making any money that. I was hysterically mad about it. What do you mean you're telling me you just have to do that? And he was of the mindset that it's a metaphysical axiom, you know, like that intrinsicist view that, oh, you just have to pay tax. You just have to. It just is like that. And it's like, no, you cannot give that answer to that domain. Metaphysics you can, but no, you can't in morality or any of these other domains. No, you can't just say it just is. You can say immorality, oh, this is something I'm still working on, how you figure out axioms for morality and then axioms of human organizations or civilizations models or politics, as some people class that domain. But epistemology, well, consciousness, why do you need to have consciousness to know? Because that's a requirement for knowing anything, in the sense where you talk about where you know, not the sense of an AI knowing information or an animal knowing something or other. I need to get into some future videos where I go into really precise technical details and explain that out. But consciousness, whether it is some animal that's conscious or humans that are conscious or an AI is conscious or some alien or some interdimensional energy being or an elf or whatever it is, to know anything you have to have consciousness. It just is in that respect. You say, well, why is it like that? Well, go back to metaphysics. That's just the way existence works. But to get there from consciousness to metaphysics, there's a whole chain of things that need to be understood. How consciousness works, how that arises, how that emerges, but that is inconsequential to putting it as an epistemic axiom. Doesn't matter how consciousness works, or even if it's an illusion, or it's mystical, it's fake, or a simulation, or a digital sentience, or this is a dream, or a DMT trip, an alien world. It doesn't matter. None of that matters at all. In this dimension or any of the other 10 billion or 0 dimensions, doesn't matter. That is still an epistemic axiom. However consciousness is formed, we have that here, and we know it. Because existence exists and all existence is governed by logical identity, axioms also must be governed. They require domain-specific law which cannot be violated. If they are violated, it does not mean you are a genius or a god, just mistaken. To clarify here about a domain, metaphysics is the domain of everything which exists. From everything we know and everything we don't know, from tweezers to mice, to microphone boxes, to lip balms, to fire, to electricity, to gravity, to electromagnetism, to thinking, to anything. They all just need to be categorized correctly. That's why metaphysics needs to be classified so much better, because it needs to be a metaphysical axiom that entities are primary and attributes of entities are secondary. And then the whole categories need to be explained. How you have actions and activities and relationships. The tweezers are on top of the table. So you're telling me tweezers are on top of? That's what they are? They're a relation? No, that's just the relationship of the tweezers to the table. Well, it's on top of my finger. Now it's below my finger. So you're telling me tweezers are belownness? No, that's just a relationship. Anyway, I'll get into that more in a future video, because that is absolutely critical to understand, and it needs to be highlighted so much more. Like, until you study philosophy properly, you don't understand how important that distinction is. Existence, or entities specifically here, because of course an entity is an existent. Entities are primary, attributes of entities are secondary. Consciousness is an attribute of an entity. It's a state an entity is in. It's like trying to say a TV has onness. The TV is on. Where's the TV? Oh, there's no TV, there's just the TV's on. Huh? You can't have onness, or the TV being on, without there being a TV. You can't have consciousness without someone who is conscious of something. It doesn't work like that. It's like the tweezers are on top of. What are they on top of? No, they're not actually on top of anything. They're just on top of. It doesn't work. It doesn't work like that. And I do understand how there's so much confusion and misunderstanding, because everything out there is just utter nonsense. Not everything, but so much in school and religion and philosophies. And again, we're so early in history, like I've already said in previous videos. It takes a long time to build knowledge and to actually know what the hell is going on, man. It takes a long time to figure out, because 99.99% of people don't care. It's the very, very, very rare few who actually care about this topic in particular, who put in the work to figure this stuff out. And this is what gives axioms their self-defeating title. Not that they self-defeat, but anytime you try to defeat an axiom and say, oh, existence doesn't exist, or no, identity doesn't exist, or consciousness is illusory, or free will is illusory, you defeat yourself anytime you try to argue against an axiom. You cannot win. You can believe you win. Of course, you can believe anything you want to, but it doesn't make it so. Any argument against an axiom is self-refuting. Oh, you don't actually exist. I don't exist. You have to be existing. You have to exist to say I don't exist. And especially when it comes to metaphysical axioms, especially, they're the ultimate self-refuting axioms of any domain. Because, say with biology, there'll be axioms of biology, how you define life. Maybe it's some kind of self-initiated change. I don't know. I need to look into that more. But say with music, there'll have to be an axiom that there's sound. If there's no sound, well, it's not music. It's art or a painting on the wall or something. There'll be axioms in all different kinds of domains. You could even put an axiom in tennis. There needs to be a racket and a ball. If there's no racket and ball, it's not tennis. Oh, but I'm hitting the air with my hand. No, it's not tennis. You're doing something else. Metaphysics is universal. Epistemology is conditional to intelligent, living, and conscious entities. Only they are capable of epistemology, of actually knowing things, of knowledge. Not all things are conscious, therefore consciousness is not ubiquitous, meaning omnipresent, meaning applicable to everything. If it's not omnipresent to all things, then why is it in the philosophical category which encompasses all things? Does not make sense, no compute. Axioms should also not be redundant. It exposes a duplication error to put consciousness in metaphysics. It's treating a derivative phenomenon as a primary one. Primary phenomenon being things exist. Something is real rather than nothing being real. Nothingness isn't true. Nothingness can never exist, because that's the point. Non-existence cannot exist. It's non-existence. That's completely illogical. But consciousness is a derivative of identity and existence and of entities, etc. Metaphysics should not include ears, eyes, rocks, people, dogs, cats, or fire. Why? Well, because they are all existing things, but they're covered by the first axiom of existence exists. It is unnecessary and inappropriate to place them in the same category individually named like that. Same for running, jumping, breathing, thinking, smelling, imagining, sleeping, reasoning, and dreaming are also not in the metaphysical category, even though they're all real things. But they're real things of a particular type of entity which exists. Not every thing that exists can run or sleep or think, etc. So you don't put it into the same category, which is a universally applicable condition. That everything exists. Everything which exists has identity. And I want to add some more in, like change. Like everything which exists changes. Everything which exists is an entity. That's the primary part of what it means to exist. And then attributes are secondary. There is no such thing as an entity or anything that exists without any attributes or qualities or characteristics, properties of its existence. Consciousness is the condition of knowing and a mode of being applicable to higher life forms. It's the way of knowing life and existence, not an existent thing with independent metaphysical status separate to the entity which is capable of the conscious state. To call it metaphysical would be to reify a state of humans into a state of the entire universe. And unintentionally, of course, Ayn Rand she's snuck in panpsychism. It's panpsychism in disguise. Though if she was directly confronted about that, she would flat out reject that. But that, in effect, unfortunately, is the result of putting consciousness into the category of metaphysics. Panpsychism is the belief that everything is conscious. Even bloody tweezers. It's like, you've got to be barking mad to think these tweezers are conscious. Like, it's crazy. Ideas are what shape the world. They are what move history. They move the world, ideas. People think it's money or war, and sure, they have a huge impact, but what are the ideas of the people that go to war, that start religions, that worship idols, that control money? It's all based upon ideas in the world of humans. Consciousness is how an intelligent living entity knows existence. It's not something that exists apart from the entity or is universally dispersed, like in panpsychism, or in any other kind of religion where God created everything in the universe and everything is just in the mind of God. You're just a dreamt up imagination in some random entity's mind. Consciousness is epistemic. It pertains to knowing, not of being. You can't state to know anything without first being in a state of knowingness. Knowledge requires the condition of knowingness, i.e. consciousness, the act or state of knowing that something is, that anything is, that's an epistemic function. It belongs to the theory of knowledge. Consciousness makes epistemology possible. It's the ground of knowledge and the experience of awareness. You can't meaningfully speak of knowing anything unless you already presuppose consciousness. Sure, a parrot could say, I know what it means to be conscious. Could parrot that out, but it doesn't know what it's saying. You could type into a computer or have ChatGPT say, I know I'm conscious, and have the computer speak, but it doesn't know what it's saying. That's what consciousness is, and it's only applicable to particular entities. And that's what I'm on a mission to find out and explain in detail. I forgot to mention at the start of this video, this is the 4th episode in my series of What is Consciousness? So if you haven't watched the previous videos, make sure you do that so this all makes sense. Because everything I present and all knowledge is built upon each other. If you take anything out of order, well, sometimes out of order it can still work, but in the case of my presentations, if you take anything out of order, it's going to be confusing. It's best started hierarchically from the bottom up. So if any of my series start at 1 and then go through, and I have many different series on my channel, and ideally watch everything so it makes sense, because there's so much knowledge, there's so much to be learned, and I've shared so much knowledge on my channel about so many different topics, and they all interconnect. And I'm always working on refining and integrating that knowledge so it makes more sense and it's more coherent all the time. And that does take a lot of time to be able to do that. A lot of effort, a lot of work. Consciousness presupposes existence and identity. Those things must already be before there can be any consciousness. Before you can be conscious, there must be something to be conscious of. Existence, what is, and identity, what it is, are metaphysically prior. Consciousness, therefore, cannot be a co-equal metaphysical axiom, because its very definition presupposes an already existing reality to be aware of. Consciousness depends on existence, not the other way around. It's like the previous video where I was talking about the primacy of existence. How you can know God isn't real, there is no God. It's just one of many ways you can know that it's not. And the question with people believing in God, it's not what evidence is there for God. The real question is, why do you need a God to live your life? That's the real question. Well, is it the real question? It's a real big question, none the least. Consciousness depends on existence, not the other way around. I state it again. Therefore, it cannot occupy the same metaphysical level as existence itself. And this is why there are so many POCs around. It's a new nickname I'm going to call for people who believe in the primacy of consciousness, which is, if any religion, they're believing in the primacy of consciousness. And in so many other mystical, spiritual traditions. And I know because I was there. I remember the first time about 2 years ago, I was in Nepal actually, and I met an American woman there, and she got me onto objectivism. She said, what do you think about Ayn Rand? I said, I don't know who that is. She says, I think you'd love her. And got me onto her work, and I remember listening to a metaphysics lecture from Leonard Peikoff, who was Ayn Rand's intellectual heir and top student. And when he first explained the primacy of existence, I was like, holy shit. Oh my goodness, I'd been a primacy of consciousness person, like for 30 years. Holy shit, I didn't even understand. Wow. It was such a big shift. One of the biggest shifts I've ever had in my life was, consciousness is not primary. Existence is. Okay, and to really understand and grasp that is obviously going to take at least another 2 years minimum of really getting that. But you still can have a massive shift and an epiphany in a 30-minute video too. if you're new to this. And again, that's why there's so many POCs around, primacy of consciousness people, because even the most objective philosophy in the world has miscategorized consciousness. No wonder the masses struggle. If Ayn Rand and objectivism was struggling to categorize that properly and explain the difference between existence and consciousness, no wonder everyone else struggles and gets messed up and is on their hands and knees groveling in front of a pile of concrete. You know, all the statues and stuff, that's what they do, hands and knees and down and worshipping and praying, and it's just so humiliating. It's so horrible. Like, look what humanity can achieve. But look at how they can destroy themselves at the same time. Consciousness is the first epistemic axiom, the foundation of knowing. To know anything, one must be conscious. That's why it's epistemically primary. It's a first recognition of knowledge. I know that I know. And I know this is quite repetitive, but repetition is good. It helps with understanding. Without this self-referential awareness, referring to the I am aware, there can be no cognition, learning, or epistemology at all. And maybe that actually needs some further explanation, because children obviously can learn before they're conscious, so there's a whole host of explanations for how that's working. The baby is aware before it's conscious. Consciousness emerges when awareness becomes self-aware. And obviously there's a big process to that. How do you do that? And obviously once you understand that, then you could build AI. It would be hard to build AI without having a proper grasp on the nature of consciousness in us. So it's funny because AI developers are probably the people who have perhaps the best understanding of consciousness and life, more so than philosophers and biologists at this point, because they're actually trying to reproduce conscious life, which is quite fascinating. That's why I'm looking at all fields, philosophy, AI, biology. I want to integrate every facet, every domain of knowledge out there to try and have the best type of understanding I possibly can. Look at everything. And that's the best way. If you are able to create new life, it's showing that you obviously understand how it works. You can't build a car if you don't know what a car is and how it works. The man who can build a car versus the man who can only speak about a car, obviously the one who built it understands carness, what it is to be a car, more than anyone else. So I think Rand's formulation mistakenly reifies consciousness. Reifies means to turn an attribute of an entity into an entity itself, into a thing. When Rand says consciousness is an active process of identification, she's treating it as if it were an entity with agency, like detached from you. Consciousness identifies. That always confused me and I always questioned that. I was a bit like, I know that sounds wrong, but I don't know why exactly. Consciousness is not identifying, you are identifying. And obviously, consciousness is massively instrumental in that. It's like if you've got a pimple on, this is a loose analogy, you've got a pimple on your head and you can't really see and you're trying to pop it. Go stand in front of a mirror. Now you can see what you're doing. Loosely, that is how consciousness is connected to us. Now we know what we're doing. Like if you're sleepwalking, you can still do stuff. You can move around. And my mum's ex-boyfriend used to hang washing out on the line. It's like, how is he doing this? He's sleepwalking. What the hell? But he's still got awareness and he's still perceiving and can see and open doors. But there's no purposeful intention. There's no meaning behind what he's doing. It's automatic, deterministic functions of the body based upon also memory as well. But the conscious perceiver isn't present there. There's no real volition. There's no real purposeful, intentional, meaningful consciousness there because he's sleepwalking. The same can be said of someone who is hypnotized or blind drunk. They're still acting. I'll save this for a future video, getting into more detail, how that works. So I reject that as an ontological category error. It's the you, the entity, which is identifying first via auto-mechanic methods from being a baby up to the point of self-awareness. There is an explanation that exists there that I'm working on and then other scientists and people are working on as well. And then obviously once you're at the point of conscious awareness, you're self-aware, which starts off dim and then gets brighter and brighter the more you work that. Just like a muscle gets stronger and stronger the more you work it, but consciousness is way different to a muscle, because the muscle only has such a small potential to increase. But your conscious awareness, which is also linked into your memory, your knowledge, your intelligence. Perhaps it's more apt to say your intelligence has so much more room to grow, and your knowledge, actually you could say your knowledge has the most room to grow, and then your intelligence, and then your consciousness, and then muscles and stuff are way smaller growth. But just think about the difference in your level of consciousness from when you were young to now. It's a huge dramatic difference. When you just start becoming self-aware as maybe a 5-year-old, or it depends on how old you are. Some people are younger, some people are older. It's a tiny dim flame in a dark room. And then as you grow older, gather that knowledge, become more intelligent, understand your relationship to everything else more. That's what consciousness is. That's an aspect of it. It's relational between you, the subject, the ego, and all the other objects in existence. And you can even turn your own self, your own ego self, your own thoughts and feelings into a new object. That's the recursive act that you can do and be conscious of. And then your consciousness, the brightness of your flame, gets brighter and brighter and brighter. Metaphorically speaking. Consciousness is the state in which you know that you're identifying and which allows / enables you to perform higher level, more abstract identifications. So Rand confuses the condition for knowing, which is consciousness. It's the condition, it's preconditional to knowing anything. To induction, deduction, reason, you need consciousness first. She's confusing the condition for knowing with a thing that acts. Confusing a state, consciousness, with the entity which is in that state. Now, I'm conscious. The TV is on. She conflates epistemic indispensability with metaphysical fundamentality. She elevates something that is necessary for knowing existence, which is an epistemic relationship, into something that is part of universal existence itself as a metaphysical primitive. That's wrong. Consciousness is, of course, the self-evident state of being aware that one knows. We are definitely on agreement of that, on that regard, that consciousness is self-evident. It's not an illusion. You know that you know. Reducibility, well, that's still up for debate, exactly how you can. There's probably different ways or different senses. You can say it's irreducible in a sense, and then in other senses it is reducible. So that depends as well. But even then, irreducibility isn't good enough to claim that something should be an axiom. No, because there's other things which are potentially irreducible in reality as well, like pleasure and pain and happiness. Why does it feel good to feel good? Well, it just does. It just feels good. Doesn't mean you get the status of being a metaphysical axiom because something is irreducible. No, it doesn't work like that. Existence precedes consciousness metaphysically, but consciousness precedes knowledge epistemically. If you'd like to learn more, go on my channel, check out the videos I have, all the different series, go to the playlists. There's heaps of organized playlists. You can check out the Primarch website, and there's organizations for the different series again on the website. There's the Athenaeum, which is my librarium of written articles with videos inserted. There's heaps of information to put this all together, so check that out in your free time and prioritize learning because it's good for you. Knowledge is power. Without it, well, the world can turn into an insufferable hellhole, and we don't want that. Let's keep on making this world a better place by learning more and more and more and understanding things objectively.